All right, so in this week's guitar lesson, we're going to talk about the process for creating a melodic sounding lead, something that's complementary to the music and feels like it fits in. It's a different approach than just playing a scale, going into our pentatonics and just sort of playing a lead that way. It ends up sounding kind of scaly, for lack of a better word, and it sounds like you're just sort of noodling around. I want something that fits perfectly into the song and is very complementary to the music as a whole. This is the song that we're going to be working towards, or the solo we're going to be working towards. So I've got this lesson split into two parts. In this video, we'll go through the first half. If you'd like to watch the second half, download the tablature, the MP3 jam track, have access to the on-screen tab viewer, which has the tab and the video on the screen at the same time. You can pause it and loop its sections and slow down playback and all that kind of cool stuff. You can get all these extra materials for this lesson by going to activemelody.com and doing a search for EP607. Okay, so melodic sounding lead, I'm saying that for lack of a better term or better phrase, and it's really just something that is complementary. And I know how it is when you're trying to improvise a solo. A lot of times what you end up doing, and this is what I do, is I just go into the pentatonic scales as a good starting point. It's a good rough draft. I can kind of build off of that if I need to. But, you know, it can be frustrating because it just sort of sounds like you're playing that pentatonic stuff. And when you hear something that sounds thought out and melodic and like it was meant to be there, it's like a different thing. So this is a different mindset than improvising, even though some of what I played there was improvised. I did several different takes and each one was a little different. There are parts of it that weren't improvised. They were sat down and sort of composed. And I want to kind of talk through, well, I'll talk through both parts, but I want to talk through the thought process of that composition bit. So let's get to this jam track. So I started with a B chord, that's my 1, and then I went to the 4 chord, which is an E. So a B to an E, 1 chord to the 4 chord. Pretty basic, right? Nothing complicated. But then to make it a little more interesting, I played the 4 minor, and then back to the 1. Now that's a technique I talk about quite a bit, and I associate that with the Beatles. So the E, then the E minor, and then back to the B. It's so pretty, and there's so many options you can play over that. And so that's the first little like chord progression that we're going to look at here. And where I went to start this was I went right into chord shapes to try and pull. I wanted to do a harmony thing. I could just sort of hear this harmony. But I wasn't sure how to do it. So I started with that first chord, which is our B. And let's look at our options here. We'll look at a few options. This is kind of just my thought process, but I think this will be helpful. So I look at a B chord here using the A shape. And this is going all back to the cage system here, these shapes. And then the next one up, where I replace my pinky with my bar here, I'm in the G shape. That's sort of the top part of that G shape. That's how I play a G shape. I don't do the whole thing with all 6 strings. I just do it like this. That's all I need of it. And where my pinky is, that's my little clue as to the next move, and that's my B note up here. If I bar there and play the E shape here, I've got my B chord using the E shape. So let's just look at those 3 to start with. We have a B, and a B. And I can pull all kinds of ideas from these hand positions, these containers. That's sort of how I think about the cage system. They're just containers. They're different ways to organize a fretboard. So the first thing I wanted to do is play this sort of harmonized sixth sound. And when we talk about harmonies, there's kind of the harmonized third and a harmonized sixth. Those are the kind of the two main ones. The harmonized sixth has more of a spread in between the two notes. So on the guitar, the easy way to identify them is like, for a harmonized sixth, there tends to be a string in between your two notes. So you've got I've got one on the second string and one on the fourth, for example. I'm skipping the third. If I played a harmonized third, the two strings are adjacent, there is no string in between. So you can hear there's a bigger gap between the harmonized sixth and the harmonized third. That's kind of the easy way to sort of identify it. Now, the reason I showed you these chord shapes is because when I'm up here in this B chord using the A shape, I've got two harmonized sixes that are inside that I use all the time. I'm just pointing these out. Just make a little mental note of this, because this is gold right here. This is stuff I wish that somebody had shown me. So that's my B chord using the A shape, but look at these little harmonies here. That doesn't seem like much, but it's going somewhere, trust me. So where I've got this bar, I've also got harmonized thirds. If I play just strings 2 and 3 in that bar, I've got this, and then watch this. If I go into this shape, you can see that where I've got my middle finger on the 5th fret 2nd string, 6th fret 3rd string with the ring finger. I've got all of that. All of that kind of represents my B chord. These are just some ideas. This is your color palette that we're going to paint a picture with. And then we're going to come up to the E shape up here, and let's look at strings 2 and 4 out of this. If I were to just play those, I've got this harmony. That one doesn't sound as pretty. It's missing the third. That's the main reason, but it's still using the principle of the strings 2 and 4, right? Knowing that the first chord was a B and then it goes to an E, the first thing that I did was like this. And that sort of didn't sound so good, right? So that's a B chord. And then there's an E chord right here. And I always look for my nearest E. You don't want to like jump. You don't want to go like this. I could do that. There's nothing wrong with that. But when I do this, it doesn't sound thought out. It doesn't sound like something somebody would sing. It sounds too guitar-y or something. I wanted it to sound more pretty, and like all the notes are kind of together and they're just going to flow just like you were singing something. So you got to sing with your fingers. That's that harmony there that I didn't like the sound of. So what I ended up doing was this. Listen to this. Ah, totally different vibe. Now let's look at what that note is. So that note, the 7th fret 4th string, is the flat 7. And this is the 5th of my chord. But so if I look at this E shape, that's my B chord using the E shape, and I lift my pinky, you can hear what I've done is I made my B chord a B7. If I lift your pinky, you play that flat 7. So I started with this, and that's just the flat 7 sound. That was the sound I was looking for. It's already got a tension because it's got that flat 7, and it's gonna pull. That tension creates a little bit of a pull. You know that's gonna go somewhere else. So it resolves to the E. And B is the 5 chord of E. Now, I wasn't thinking any of this stuff. I'm just mentioning this after the fact. So this isn't something that goes through your Rolodex of ideas. But it's kind of an interesting thing that B is the 5 chord of E, and E is the 4 chord of B. I mean, it's just something to think about. So we have our first harmony there. That represents my B. The next chord was an E, and I wanted to find my nearest E. Well, I could have went like this, right? Because this is inside of my E chord using the A shape. That would have worked, but I like the sound of this. Isn't that pretty? And that is my E chord using the C shape. You can start to see why this cage system is so important, because everything you're looking for is right where you're at. I'll put a lesson up on the screen that's all about that. Like whatever note you're looking for, whatever chord, whatever scale, it's never more than 1 fret away from where you're at for all 12 keys. It's really cool when you think of it that way. And that's what the cage system gives you. So our harmony goes like this, right? And this is just strings 2 and 4 out of my E chord using the C shape. And then the song goes to the E minor. All I have to do, since that's the 3rd of my E, all I have to do is flat the 3rd. I can keep the other note. I can keep my E note there. So now look at this. I've got... You can already hear it going in the direction of the chord progression. Now the next thing is the song goes back to the B. And watch this. Here's where we are, right? Our E minor. Just go down, just move it down 1 fret, because look, we're in the B chord using the A shape. Are you starting to see this? Oh yeah, there's those 2 that you just talked about. So we basically just connected from this B chord down to here. There was that E and E minor in between. But when you put it all together, another thing is happening now, though, and this is the big thing that sort of pulled my ear in this direction. Listen to the 4th string. It's walking down chromatically, and then it's going to go like this. So it literally walks every fret or every note down from the 7th fret all the way down, and so it's got this little line movement that's happening through the progression. There's the B, and then I went like this. So when I came to this, that's where the chord progression plays this G7, and then it goes down to the F sharp 7. The F sharp 7 is the 5 chord. And so all I did was, that's the 5 chord which we're going to. I just went up a half step. This happens all the time in music. It's like another chord you can get to before you get to the 5 chord. So you take your 5 chord, you just go up a half step. In this case, it's a G. Go down to the F sharp, and then back to the B. But look at what's happening on strings 2 and 4, since we're staying with that little movement there. If I look at this G7, just like we did with the B7 up here, right? And then the song goes to the F sharp 7. So it's just walking this down. And then the song finally resolves to the B. And then it went down to here. 1st fret, 4th string, and then the open B string. This is the 3rd interval of my B chord. So I just walked it all the way down, basically from here. So I just love the sound of that movement. Even without the jam track, you can hear the chord progression. Just with those little harmonies. And then we go back to the 5 chord, which is our F sharp, and I went like this. Little bluesy turnaround. I think that's how I did it. And I'm thinking about this chord shape here. So now the chord progression is going to repeat. We're going to go through the same ideas. This time I'm going to basically follow the same kind of feeling that we had the first time, since we've already kind of carved that out. But it's going to be more single string this time. It starts with a harmony, that same harmony that we started with before, that B7, harmonized 6. And then watch this. I came up here just as an embellishment up to this 9th fret 2nd string, and then down to the E note here, the 5th fret 2nd string. And then watch this. So what I'm doing there is, remember the song goes from the E, and I play the E note, then it goes to the E minor, So I did a half bend. So I went 5/7 on the second string, and then a half bend there. Bend and release. Now this half bend is my flat third. There's my E. And this is what I was picturing when I was playing that. I was picturing my E chord using the A shape. That's the third interval. That's the flat third. So I can go. Now some of this, I'll be honest, when I'm coming up with this, I'm not visualizing all of this stuff quite the way that I'm explaining it. I mean, it happens after the fact. I sit and think about it, but a lot of that is just feeling. And you have to get to this point, whether you're composing or you're improvising, you have to get to the point where you sing with your fingers to some extent. There are always going to be some mapping and stuff, but you want to get... You want to be able to do this. Now what I'm doing here, the rest of this is all just the major pentatonic scale. And I'll show you note for note. That's that half bend into the flat third. And then when I came to this note, I slid into this note, which is the 8th fret third string. And this is my major pentatonic scale, my B major pentatonic scale pattern 2. So look at this. Here's my B major pentatonic scale pattern 1. Right? And here's pattern 2. So now I'm here in this note. And so you can see where I'm at in terms of pentatonics. And from here, this is how I'm just going to see it as pentatonics. And you can see that even without a jam track, I can improvise here in this pentatonic area. Okay, I was hitting a few notes outside of the pentatonics, like into the major scale. But it's still just that B major pentatonic scale, pattern 1 and pattern 2. So now the song goes to the second half, which is the B part. I like to write these sort of 2 parts in these jam tracks just to make it more like a real song. And so it goes to this G sharp minor or A flat minor, which is the relative minor of the key. So that's our 6th chord. And then it goes to the 2 major and then to the 5 chord. Now that 2 major is a C sharp major. It's actually, I played a C sharp 7. And so you can always do that. You can take, a minor. I know like in the circle of fifths, your 2 chord is a minor, and like that's the proper way in the chord family, but you can make it major. And what's cool is if you make it major, even though it's a different sound, it's like a borrowed chord, I guess, technically, or whatever, but I think of it as a secondary dominant chord because this chord is the 5 chord of my F sharp. And so you can hear that tension release, and it resolved nicely to the F sharp, and the F sharp is the 5 chord of the key of the song. So you play the 5 chord of the 5 chord, that's what you do. And that happens all over music. I'll put up a lesson on the screen if you're interested in secondary dominance, and in that lesson I go into full detail about what that is, so you can learn all about it that way if you want. All right, so those are the chords. We have our G sharp minor, which goes to our C sharp 7, and then that goes to the F sharp, or F sharp 7. And then I went to get back into that little cycle, I went to the 5 chord of that first chord that we just played there, our G sharp. So the 5 chord of that would be an E flat 7. And then we repeat it again. So you can, if you want to know how to like loop back through something or get to a chord, let me just put it that way, if you're composing something, just find whatever that chord's 5 chord is. So I was trying to get back to here, the G sharp minor chord. So what's the 5 chord of that? Oh yeah, it's the E flat. It's right on top of it there. So I play that, and that pulls me right back into it. All right, so now what do we play over that? Well, the thing that works perfect actually, and it's where we actually already were, is the G sharp minor pentatonic scale. Look at these notes. These are the same notes as my B major pentatonic scale. It's the same notes. Because G sharp minor is my relative minor, the relative minor shares the same scale as its relative majors. And the point of that is my B, my G sharp minor are connected. They share the same scales. So I started with little minor pentatonic lick there. And then that next chord is that C sharp chord. And remember, I said C sharp 7. But if I look at my C sharp right here, so remember we were playing off this, we're playing this minor pentatonic here. The next chord is right here. That's my C sharp. Well, look at the top part of that. This little triad here. I'm going to use that as my little idea for where this melody should come from. All those notes are coming out of that triad, basically. And that last note brings me back to that F sharp, right? But now you can sort of see that this is the C sharp chord that's inside of there. So what I'm saying with this is, like, you never really break away from these chords. You're always kind of playing chords in a way. Like if you're wanting to do this melodic stuff, you're always seeing the chords and you're thinking like kind of more like a rhythm player, at least from a chord perspective. You're seeing these chords, and then when you can see them, it's like, oh yeah, I've got these ideas here. I can. And that sounds a lot more melodic than me just staying in the pentatonic. It just doesn't have the same feeling as touching on those chord tones. All right, well, I'm going to wrap up the part 1 video right here. We've covered a lot of information. Leave a comment below. Let me know if any of this has resonated with you. You've picked up an idea, maybe something you hadn't thought about before. Or if something's confusing, leave a comment on that too. I do read through them all. I think it's super helpful. I'm trying to encourage this in all these videos, just to leave comments about things that you've picked up, like ideas you picked up, or like little light bulbs that have gone off, like, oh, I didn't think about this that way, or that this way, or whatever. I think that's just helpful for everybody. When I see that kind of stuff in comments, it always like points me in that direction, you know, if I'm looking something up. So I think we can kind of help each other learn in that respect. All right, I'll see you in the part 2 video where we'll go over the second half.